Okay, everybody. So I want to show you something real quick. This comes from the Office of Inspector General. And the basic thing is that they've been pretty busy, especially with Doge and President Trump, basically creating a situation where, they're auditing a lot of the things going on with Social Security benefits. Well, they've just released a new document pertaining to what they found. And basically, this is from June 18th, 2025. Beaver Falls resident pleads guilty to theft of Social Security benefits. U.S. Attorney's Office, Western District of Pennsylvania. So, Pittsburgh, a resident of Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, pled guilty in federal court to a charge of theft of government property. Acting United States Attorney Troy Rivetti announced today. Nicholas T. Grimes, 30, pled guilty to one count before United States District Judge J. Nicholas Ranjan on June 17th, 2025. Now, as you can imagine, the title of the video is that somebody's stealing Granny's check. And the reality of this individual that is stealing Granny's check is that this happens quite often. In connection with the guilty plea, the court was advised that following the death of a Title II Social Security benefit recipient, Grimes began stealing that person's Social Security retirement benefits, beginning as early as 2014. Grimes stole benefits totaling approximately $216,779 by negotiating the benefits from the deceased account through ATM transactions. So one of the things that happens is somebody will pass away, and then the SSA will go ahead and have somebody who is elderly, who has passed away, who's unreported, actually be stolen from, where the money keeps paying, nobody reports it, and then somebody steals that money. As you may recall, a lot of people were very hyper aggressive against Elon Musk for making a claim that there were older people who basically were still getting paid, who basically were having their benefits stolen. The exact situation. And so the main thing that I like to point to is the news kept pushing this agenda that there was realistically no, right? There was just not much fraud or no fraud, or it was ridiculous or this or that, and so on and so forth. And yeah, Elon's team made mistakes, no doubt about it. But I guess from my perspective, the big thing that I just have to keep in mind with this is that at the end of the day, Elon Musk and, Donald Trump, I guess we're getting a delivery out there or something. I guess at the end of the day, the big thing that you have to kind of keep in mind with this situation is that the exact things that they claimed were happening were literally happening. And this is not a story that hasn't happened over and over. This is a story that has happened over and over and over. And the way it usually works, and I can't go into too much detail about this because of the Pacer claim and it being sealed and stuff, but the basic details, about this and how it usually comes down is the following. Somebody will pass away, nobody will tell the government. Somebody will continue to fill out forms. The government will get wise, and they'll notice that that person no longer utilizes their Medicare. When they're not using their Medicare after such a long period of time, usually basically the government goes, hey, let's check into this. Now, the government has a harder time checking into it if somebody's getting older and older, but not paying for Medicare or Medicaid as, being given to them. So if they had like a private insurance, they opted out of Medicare, then what happens is it's a harder thing for the government to track whether or not they're using it or what they're doing with it, etc. So kind of the bottom line here is what usually happens is they notice the Medicare is not being used and somebody's in their 80s and they're like, what the hell is this? Because people in their 80s use their Medicare, and then they start to investigate it. They start to look into it. Now, in this particular situation, it's a little different. I can't go into the fact pattern because, obviously it's not meant for general consumption, general public consumption. But the bottom line is, and I really want to tell you guys what happened here. But the bottom line is this. Usually the elderly person disappears. Nobody ever finds them. It doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes they'll have individuals, right? They'll have basically, they'll have somebody who committed the crime actually tell the person what happened to the elderly person, whether they were put in a 55-gallon drum, fed to the pigs, or basically, they were buried somewhere under some hills somewhere, that's 15 miles away. So the main thing to keep in mind with this is sometimes the SSA OIG team will get lucky to actually know what happened to the person. But, a lot of times the person goes missing. There's no true traditional burial, deaths, any of that stuff. And then at that point, it's really just a question of when did this person likely pass away? And think about that. A lot of you guys haven't thought about this, but if a person is gone and we don't know when they passed away, right? Whether it was, they were unfortunately attacked by somebody or they just passed away by natural causes. When somebody's gone and we don't know when they passed away, the court system has a hard time figuring out when the benefit should have stopped. So, they can look at transactions as to when the thief stopped taking the ATM transactions, the money out of the account. But the reality is then they've got to interview basically the people who live in the nearby area. And if it's years and years down the line, I mean, this case goes all the way back, beginning as early as 2014. Nobody remembers what the hell was going on in 2014. That was a totally, hold on, let me look up real quick. What was happening? Big things that happened in 2014. Okay. We had the West African Ebola virus episode, the conflict in Ukraine, 2014 Gaza war, fighting in Ukraine and Crimea. Robin Williams passed away. Malaysia Airlines disaster. Luxembourg decides to legalize same-sex marriage. The rise of ISIS. Scotch referendum, September 18th. So, nobody really, you know what I mean? Stuff is going on, but it's like, that's over 10 years ago. So the point is they don't actually know when she realistically passed. And then they have to question, well, when did he realistically start taking the money? That's the next question. When is that moment in time where they can track when the perpetrator actually took the funds? So that's a big problem they have because they just don't know when somebody passes away. Now, will the government ever do something as, out there and crazy and insane as, making people have something on their body that tells the government when they're alive and not alive? Maybe, maybe it's possible. I don't know. I feel like that would be a constitutional violation. But I think at the end of the day, realistically, with this whole situation, what we have to kind of keep in mind is that this is the type of crime that just happens over and over and over again. And the SSA doesn't really have an amazing way to know exactly when somebody passes away. What do you feel the SSA should do from your perspective when it comes to somebody passing away? Do you feel that, there should be some sort of medical device that tells us when somebody has passed, that is purely just a reporting device that can tell if there's a heartbeat? Do you feel that people should not have to wear something like that, etc.? Real quick, I want to do a shout out to Diana, specifically Princess Diana 62. She did a $5 donation on the last video, and I wanted to do a quick shout out. Also, I want to do a shout out to My Stanley Cup 09, who did a $1.99 donation. Let me put a little heart on that. That's awesome. Walter's wonderful. Super thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So the main thing that I want you to kind of keep in mind with this is how do we get the SSA to structurally not pay people who get rid of elderly people? And that ties into this whole war situation to be, just to be thinking about that, with the whole situation with Israel and Iran. We did a video about, a nuclear situation or a war situation. And the question then becomes, okay, which disabled group would have the most difficult time in a war-related situation? And I gave all the different arguments, blind, mobility impaired, mentally impaired, physically impaired, institutionalized. We went through the whole schmutz. And what I realized with it is that I kept coming back to those who are mentally impaired that cannot make good qualifying choices, good analytical skill choices. And I think realistically, one of the things that will happen in war is that there will be a lot of people who target the elderly and then basically have a scheme, a system, because the government's not going to be as on top of things as they normally would to investigate stuff. But I guess my point with this whole situation is I think that certain groups in a war-like scenario would be targeted just like this situation, where basically they'll target elderly people. They'll have a system set up to go ahead and have people fake like the elderly person is still alive and going to medical and things like that. They'll take the money, they'll take the checks, and that'll be the actual, what happens. And I don't think a lot of people in America think about how fragile of a class a disabled person or an elderly person who's receiving retirement benefits actually is. And, as a result of that, we kind of live in this fairy world of no war, no issues, no this, no that. If we lived in in a country that was next to a more hostile country, we wouldn't be so against, firearms or this or that. I mean, not that most Americans are very pro that, but there are some people who are like, I don't want to touch it. It might go bang, And I look at that, I'm just like, oh wow, you know what I mean? The fear, and that's the weird thing about it. If you can figure out how to manipulate the mind of a person to fear a firearm because they will fear that they will be injured by it, then you've essentially taken over their right to exist as a free human. So you've got freedom, that's the ability to do what you want. And then you've got liberty, which is the ability to restrict, people that are more powerful than you from, exacting their more powerful freedom on you. That's the balancing effect of freedom and liberty. And so the thing is, if you convince somebody that they don't want to own, know how to use, or properly, train with firearms, then you've taken away their ability to use their liberty, which means that their freedom will be destroyed after a certain amount of time. And that's always a weird thing for me when I run into people who are like, I don't want, I run into Canadians a lot that are, I don't like guns. Oh my God, they scare me. You have to understand, to me, the elderly and the disabled, like a lot of them, giving them training on firearms, giving them training on self-defense, giving them training on protection and stuff. It's crucial, because if we ever got into a war scenario, right, they would be a targeted group by those who are trying to commit crimes like are reported by the Office of Inspector General. So my point is, I think it's important for people to start to see into that direction, that they have a right. They have both the right of freedom and they have the right of liberty, and they should be using them to have self-defense. That's just what I'm saying. So anyways, I will catch you a little bit later. Please remember to like, please remember to subscribe, hit the membership button if you want. Head over to Google, type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida. I will catch you maybe later tonight. I have to see. But other than that, you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Keep rocking and rolling, and we will go from there. Attorney Walter Hnot, thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Stay cool if you're on the East Coast. All right, bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.